Hi everyone, I'm here in the lab today to introduce you to some of our lab supplies. Our first piece of equipment is beakers. So here in your lab station, you typically will see an entire set of beakers. The small ones are nested inside of the larger ones. This is the proper way to store these beakers, and they should always be put back away like this. The next thing is beaker tongs. These are beaker tongs. As you can see, they're coated in a material that allows them to withstand heat. So when the beaker is hot, you can use your beaker tongs to safely pick up the beaker off of a hot plate and transfer it to your lab station. Our next item is a Bunsen burner. This is a Bunsen burner. Here's where the flame will come out, and then this end will be hooked up to the gas line. Our next item is an electronic balance. Looks like so. You've probably used one before. That's how we will be able to find the mass of our different chemicals that we're using. An Erlenmeyer flask looks like this. It has a narrow neck to it, which prevents chemicals from splashing out. Evaporating dish looks like this. It is a thin, made of porcelain dish. It has a little lip which you can pour out of. The fume hood, I'll have to take you over there to that. You've seen that before in my room. Looks like this. It allows us to do chemical experiments without being exposed to any fumes that may be given off. We won't be using that this year. We just don't do enough labs that have that type of fumes given off. Our next one is goggles, which we'll wear for every lab. Graduated cylinder looks like this. They come in various sizes. We typically use the 10 milliliter and the 50 milliliter graduated cylinder. Hot plate has a small knob here for adjusting the heat. This is what we'll be using to heat up any water or other chemicals that we might be heating. Metal tongs look like this. You can see that they do not have a coating like the beaker tongs did, and they kind of have a funny shape here. So metal tongs. This is our mortar and pestle. You've got your mortar and your pestle, and we will use this to grind up any materials that we might need in a smaller pieces. Pipette, we use two different pipettes. One of them sometimes is called a dropper, which looks like this, and then we also have these pipettes, which are 2 milliliter pipettes. Either way, if I say pipette, this is what I'm talking about. The next two items are together. This is a ring clamp. It is clamped onto the ring stand. The second one is ring stand. And we use this to heat things. So we'll set a beaker on top of this ring here, and then we'll put our Bunsen burner underneath. And it'll allow us to heat it, but not have that glass so close that it might break. Next we have the scoopula, which looks like this. It's metal, it's just kind of bent slightly into a U shape, and that allows us to scoop different chemicals out of their containers and onto either a weigh boat or into another container that we might need. And our next one is a spatula. This is used for stirring. or possibly in place of a scoopula, where you can scoop things out with a spatula. We're getting there, hang on. This is a spot plate. It's also made out of porcelain, and the wells that are in it are just very shallow circles. So this is not used for very much chemical. This is just really to see a visual reaction. We're not mixing a lot of chemicals with that. Next we have our glass stirring rod. This is what we mainly use for stirring more than the spatula. And a test tube, which you're familiar with. We use this for mixing small amounts of chemicals. A test tube brush is used to clean the inside of the test tube after your reaction. A test tube holder looks like this, sometimes called a test tube clamp. Is used to hold a test tube over the Bunsen burner flame. So if we needed to heat the chemicals that were in this test tube, we could use this test tube holder or test tube clamp to hold the test tube over the flame and heat the chemicals inside. Our next item is a test tube rack. We usually use these wooden ones in which the test tube can either sit on the top portion of the rack like so, or on the bottom there's another rack and it could sit and rest in there. Either way, this allows you to see the reaction really well, so you can see what's going on in the test tube. The other thing that most of our racks have are these little pegs, and this is good for being able to allow the test tubes to dry. Once you've finished doing your experiment and washed them out, you can set them here to dry upside down. You will also see a plastic one in your lab station. These can be good for drying purposes, but are never used to actually experiment. Because if you notice, when I put my test tube into this test tube rack, I can't see the bottom of my test tube, and that's where my reaction is occurring. So if I use this to see my reaction, I won't be able to see anything. Almost done. This is our thermometer. Pretty self-explanatory. You can see the numbers are on there, and the red line is showing you where the temperature is. Triple beam balance here. Maybe you've seen one used at your doctor's office. In some places they still use one of these, but 3 different weights that allow you to move them to get to the proper weight. Just a different way of weighing something. Next we have our wash bottle, which has a little nozzle on it. Fill this up with water. Good way to wash up your equipment after the lab. This is your watch glass. It's kind of concave, like a contact lens almost. Looks like a big contact lens. And this is a way that we can also do some reactions on this. Here's the difference. Here we have our weigh boat. We use this to weigh our different chemicals, particularly dry ones. We put this on our electronic scale, put this on, zero the scale out or tear it, and then we add our chemicals and we have our perfect weight. Last 2 are a well plate. This is similar to the spot plate which I showed you earlier, but this is a well plate. There are wells in here. If you can see, these are much deeper than the spots, so we're able to use much more chemical in these, but it also allows us to have this grid so that we know are able to keep track of what is in each of these wells. We can label it and know that. Last thing is wire gauze. This is placed on our ring stand like so, and then that allows us to put our beaker, rest that on top of our wire gauze, then our Bunsen burner can be underneath this and allow this to safely heat up without breaking the glass. That is all of our lab equipment. I hope you are able to study those and figure out what each of those are and what their purposes are.